Welcome to Uncovered. It's Wednesday, the 5th of June. 5th of June. I can never do the date. Like, I can talk about politics, but I don't know, dates and times not very good with. I'm Anthony, he's Ron. This is Uncovered, where we uncover the MAGA propaganda that is, miscovered by the mainstream media, I would say. They do their best. They're trying their hardest.
They're getting better.
But they just don't quite get it. And I also don't think they're taking the threat to democracy and the rise of fascism very seriously. So that's why we do our best here to do exactly that. And, feel free to comment below, to communicate with us. We do this every Wednesday. There's an audio podcast as well. And we're very grateful for everybody's support. Ron, where should we start? We have a lot of stuff going on this week. Donald Trump is losing it. We'll come on to him in just a little while. First, though, I want to talk about the Hunter Biden trial. That is kind of underway as we speak. Just bring us up to speed on that, and then I'll show a clip of how Fox is covering it.
Yeah, look, the statute that he's being, and I'm not a Hunter Biden apologist. I mean, I've been extremely critical of Hunter Biden for a long time. Okay, so, and I have no problem with him being prosecuted. I will say, though, that the statute that he's being prosecuted for, which is purchasing a firearm while under the influence of drugs, is never used. I mean, people do that constantly. They're drug addicts buy weapons and firearms every day in this country. Thousands of them do that. Thousands of them are in possession of firearms while intoxicated. They're never prosecuted. I've been a criminal lawyer for 30 years. I mean, the number of and I've probably represented, 400, 500 people charged with firearm offenses. Maybe 2 or 3 of those over 30 years were prosecuted for the same thing that Hunter is being prosecuted for. It is extremely rare, but it is a situation where I think politics came into play here. It's the fact that it's the president's son, and if they just, with all the stuff that was on the laptop, all the drug use, all the prostitution stuff, all the gun stuff, I think if they'd have done nothing politically, that would have looked pretty bad. So, but the question is, are they going to be able to convict him at trial? Because I'm not so sure. And that's going to be the strange dichotomy here is Trump gets convicted, and if Hunter wins this trial, which doesn't really matter to me one way or the other, politically, if he wins this trial, you can just see their heads are going to explode, but he very well might. And not for the reasons that, and they're already starting the conspiracies, as to why he might, that everything's rigged, of course, and all of that. That it's being held in Delaware, which is that's where the crime occurred. This is the part they don't get. It's unfair that it's in Delaware because that's Biden country. Well, that's where the crime occurred. That's where you hold trials. So, the conspiracies are flying, but it will certainly be interesting to watch if he's A, convicted, and then B, if he is convicted. I mean, if he's found not guilty, but B, if he is convicted, if he goes to jail. I mean, putting the president's son in jail in the middle of the election, it kind of takes some of the wind out of the sails of their argument about this 2-tiered system of justice, right?
You can never say that, it is a quiet day in American politics when you've got, one candidate for president potentially going to jail, and then you've got the actual president's son potentially going to jail, and just 5 or 6 months left before polling day. I mean,
it's the same time.
Right. It's quite something, aside from the fact that obviously Trump has other legal cases coming his way as well. I wanted to mention something about this issue of juries, because you said obviously it's in Delaware, and Delaware is a Biden-friendly jury and all that kind of stuff. And there really is a lack of trust in this country regarding juries doing their civil service or their civic duty and putting politics to one side. Obviously, Trump's been railing about this off the back of the New York jury, because he says, Republicans have never been elected in New York. Of course, they're all going to be Democrats. Despite the fact he's not allowed to speak about the jury, he has said this and broken his gag order multiple times. And I suppose it's the same for Delaware, isn't it? There is this kind of automatic cultural feeling that, Delaware's a good place for Hunter Biden because, of the family home. But I don't know. I kind of trust Americans a little more than that, that they are able to operate outside of this binary political persuasion. What do you think?
Yeah, I've done 300 criminal jury trials, okay, prosecuting and defending, and I haven't agreed with the jury verdicts 100% of the time, but I agree with them probably 95% of the time. I think that they do a good job, that they take their civic responsibility very, very seriously, and their oath as jurors very seriously. I think people tend to rise to the occasion. They come in with biases and prejudices, but when they take that oath and they go through that process, they take that job very seriously. And the thing about it is right-wingers and Republicans have never been critical of the jury system. The people who have been critical are generally have been minorities and poor people who tend maybe not to be able to have the best representation and all of that. And so are the most resources for appeals and investigators and expert witnesses. They don't have those resources. And so they're the ones that generally have been critical of the system. Not Republicans or right-wingers. The only time I can remember really Republicans getting upset about a jury verdict was O.J. Simpson.
Yeah.
For the most part, they think everything's great, but the roles are reversed now that their cult hero has been found guilty. Now they're the ones sowing distrust in the legal system. And like we just said, if Hunter gets acquitted, it just throws gasoline on the fire,
And Merrick Garland was being questioned yesterday. And, I'm on the fence about Merrick Garland. People are quite critical of him. He is a kind of lifelong conservative, though, isn't he? And he's, somebody who should be putting his political personal interests to one side. And I don't doubt that he does. But he did take 2.5 years to bring any charges against Donald Trump for January 6th, which a lot of people say, because it was televised and because the coup was so blatantly obvious and we kind of heard him say it and we watched him do it, that he should have been led away in handcuffs the very next day. And that never happened.
It should have been done at least before 2021 was over with. If not him, a special counsel at least appointed. I mean, he only did it because the January 6th committee forced his hand, by just putting overwhelming evidence in front of the public. That Garland pretty much had no choice at that point. I don't think he wanted to do it at all. But he's handed Donald Trump his political argument, which is, hey, they're only prosecuting this while I'm running for president, when they could have done it long before he was even a candidate. So, yeah, I think Merrick Garland, when you say conservative, I would say institutionalist. He is, he's an institutionalist. Which is sort of what I am too, and he's a traditionalist, and so the concept of him is probably why I defended him as long as I did, because we're the same in that respect. Is that we're all about tradition and taking our time and being deliberative, and I'm sort of the same way.
But so is Joe Biden,
and so is Joe Biden. Biden is like this with Garland, and I don't think Joe Biden had a huge problem with Trump not being prosecuted either. But, I think that I was wrong, and I realized I was wrong. I mean, I wanted Trump prosecuted, but I had no issue with Garland taking his time. But now I think we all realize that was a mistake.
Well, that's because he didn't just take his time. He was actively slow walking it. And, he took advice from Christopher Wray, the FBI director, to say this probably isn't a good idea. And before you know it, the rest of us were like, what happened to American democracy? There is a knock-on effect. And we should remind people that not just Garland's delay, but also Donald Trump's daily, constant criticism of the legal system, the justice system, and the people on Fox saying the same, and all of the surrogates and all of the lawmakers saying the same, is chipping away at the legal system, at the justice system, and at the democratic system.
Same thing they did with the press.
Yes.
The university system.
Yes.
Scientists, medicine, the school system, the school boards. They have systematically destroyed and attacked, not destroyed, but tried to destroy and attack and undermine every single institution in America. And now it's the courts.
I mean, it's very sad, because without a system of law and order, ironically their kind of electioneering phrase, that the country really doesn't have any structure. And we need it for a civilized society. And maybe they just don't want a civilized society. Maybe they want unrest, and they want it to be like the Wild West, because then they get to play with their guns and be cowboys.
Well, that's the precursor to any autocracy, is chaos, because what happens is you turn to the strong man. Same thing in Weimar Republic in Germany. We could go on and on and on. When there's chaos, that's when autocrats, take over.
Let's look at how Fox have been covering Hunter Biden's case. This is a very serious issue, isn't it? Because they're now using, we talked about the language of criticizing juries, but now they're getting into very kind of racial areas with their language. I'll play the clip and then we can talk about it. Take a look at this.
It's called jury nullification. It's when you pick a jury that will give you a not guilty verdict. They know you're guilty, but they just disagree with the law. The strategy plays on the racial makeup of the jury, which is mostly black, as well as the Biden's influence in Delaware. The hope is this jury won't convict for a drug-related crime. Everybody in Delaware knows the Bidens. That's why Jill and Ashley are sitting front row. But that's not all. The Biden family brought Mouse to court. Mouse is a Delaware legend. Joe Biden was the best man at his wedding. Mouse runs Delaware's NAACP and has been involved in the community for decades. They want every black juror to see Mouse sitting with the Bidens. If you can get the jury on your side, all of a sudden, this case is not a slam dunk.
I mean, this is really a highly inappropriate, but ultimately just completely racist.
He's singling out black jurors. He's pointing out that the majority of the jury is black, and that's why they are susceptible to ignoring the law, to violating their oath, because they're black. And by bringing in, by not bringing in, by the fact that a lifelong friend of Hunter and Joe Biden is one of the people attending this trial, one of many, it is somehow going to cause the jurors, by seeing an NAACP guy, is going to cause the jurors to ignore the law and violate their oath because they're black and he's the NAACP leader. I mean, you can't get more racist and disgusting than that. And there were a few MAGA people who were pushing back on my clip that I posted of that last night, saying, "Oh no, he wasn't talking about them being black." I mean, that's just ridiculous. It's pretty obvious what he's doing right there. And the other point is, what did Trump do? This was Trump's playbook. Once again, it's the projection. Every single day, Trump brought in members of Congress, senators, governors, district attorneys to sit behind him and walk in so the jury could see them, to try and put pressure on them by saying, look, all these politicians, all these famous people are backing me. So what? Hunter has one family friend who's a NAACP guy, and that all of a sudden means that they're trying to influence the jury. It's racist and it's preposterous. And, Waters every single night since this trial started has focused on jurors. And that is an incredibly dangerous thing to do. We need to leave jurors alone. And I've said this about mainstream media too. Do not contact jurors and interview them after their jury service, because you're putting a target on their back.
Well, CNN did it immediately after the trial. I should also say at this point that Donald Trump did a very similar thing when he had his minuscule rally in the Bronx a couple of weeks ago, didn't he? By inviting up these two black guys, rappers. It turned out that they had convictions. And then you started hearing from MAGA people, well, now that Trump's got a conviction, the black community is going to feel closer to him because, they're all criminals and now he's a criminal. Like, this was said out loud, came out of the mouths and the minds of MAGA Republicans. The racism is systemic, it is baked in, and it shows a total blindness to a kind of modern integrated society.
Yeah, you notice they don't say black people are going to be attracted to Trump because he's a successful businessman, or because he's a tough, strong leader, or because of a particular policy, or he's all about freedom, or, Supreme Court justices. Oh, no, that's not what they're saying will attract black voters to Trump. They're saying the fact that he's a felon now, the fact that he's a convicted felon is the key to him now, to black voters now loving Donald Trump. Let me tell you something. If there's any, black voters out there who that's the reason why they've suddenly decided to vote for Trump, these are people who probably have never voted anyway. They're not typically voters if they have that kind of a mentality. And it's not just black people. I mean, there are white people who may find Donald Trump attractive because he's some kind of gangster or bad boy now in their view. But I mean, look at what he was convicted of like paying off a porn star to fix an election. How do black people relate to that? That kind of an offense. It's just disgusting. It's racist. It's offensive. And I hope it backfires on them. And that's why I've tried to, show people exactly how racist they really are with this messaging, to try and just say, look, they don't care about you. They're cynical. And this is what they really think about you.
And he's been, Trump's been doing it regarding Jewish people as well, making these references to, if you're Jewish and you vote for Joe Biden, then you must be crazy and all this kind of stuff. I mean, it makes no sense whatsoever. And yet when you live in the tiny racist brain of Donald Trump, it makes perfect sense. And
Jews should vote for me because I put the embassy in Jerusalem.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's saying, like, think about how disgusting that is. Like, you're saying that an American Jew living in Milwaukee or New York or Arizona, that's what he cares about, he or she, is Israel and the embassy being in Jerusalem. When, just because you're an American Jew doesn't mean you're caught up in the day-to-day affairs of Israel.
But he also thinks that all Jews hate Arabs.
Yeah, right.
Right? And so he's working on the assumption, because if he was to win, he would cozy up to Netanyahu and he would turn the Gaza Strip into a parking lot and probably build condos on it. And that is his mindset. And he presumes that everybody else is as racist and as xenophobic as he is.
Yep.
And it's all projection. Terrifying, really. Let's talk about, it kind of leads us in nicely to him talking about Vladimir Putin releasing the Wall Street Journal reporter Evan Gersovich. Tell us about this before I show the clip, because he's been using this as kind of collateral, and again, it's a situation that has it's not based in fact, but he's using it as for electioneering purposes, claiming that he has a relationship with Putin that Joe Biden doesn't.
When Americans overseas were detained unlawfully and subjected to abuse, torture, mistreatment by his dictator friends, Putin or Kim, the Warrenberger case in North Korea, and who are the people in I'm drawing blanks on the names now, but the two people that were both former U.S. Marines that were detained in Russia during his presidency, he did nothing. He did nothing to free those people. Joe Biden at least freed one of them. Trevor Reed is one, right?
That's right. Yeah.
And he freed one. And Trevor Reed came back and denounced Trump and said Trump did nothing for me, didn't care, didn't even talk to my family. So the idea that, Trump now comes out and says, okay, I'll get Gerskovich freed. Well, look, we know what Putin's game is here. He's just detaining Americans like Brittany Griner, et cetera, for no reason. So he can leverage, because he knows that Americans care about their own citizens, whereas the Russians don't. And that will pay a heavy price to get our people back. And he's playing this game with us. And I think Biden has kind of had enough of it. And although he wants to do everything he can to get Gerskovich back, he's not going to, give up the farm for him because Putin has seized a journalist for no reason. So what does Trump do? Comes out and says, in the most disgusting way possible, says, I will free him right after I win the election. Putin will free him for me. He'll only do it for me, though. He won't do it for Biden. So in other words, what he's saying is he has the cachet, the relationship with Putin where he could free this man anytime he wants by picking up the phone. But he won't do it unless he wins the election. He's gonna wait and let this guy stay in Russian captivity 5 more months. Then if he wins, he's gonna. And of course, what do we know? He won't do that. He's not going to do anything, even if he does win.
Well, he doesn't have any sway. I mean, this is the thing. You know, Putin is a former KGB agent. Putin controls the narrative.
That's right.
Trump is doing what Putin wants him to do. And this is also the same as when Trump kind of vetoed the immigration bill. You know, it's like, I'm not having anything happen while Joe Biden is president. You've got to vote for me, and then when I come in, I'll fix it. Except he won't.
And he's going to end the Ukraine war.
Yeah.
He's going to end the war in Israel. Everything is going to be wonderful the second he wins his election, according to Trump. Right.
Let's take a look at him kind of emotionally blackmailing his voters.
Gershkovich, the reporter for the Wall Street Journal who is being held by Russia, will be released almost immediately after the election, but definitely before I assume office. He will be home. He will be safe. Vladimir Putin, president of Russia, will do that for me, and I don't believe he'll do it for anyone else.
What a disgusting creature he is.
How can any American, reasonable, intelligent, halfway intelligent American watch that and say, I want that person to be the president?
Right.
You know, it's just horrible. But the thing is, most Americans will never see that. They won't see it.
No.
You know, but I look, that's what we do. We try to get it out to as many people as we can. Hopefully they'll send that and share that with their friends, their relatives. But you know what? Mainstream media didn't cover it. You know, they didn't do any stories on this, on what Trump said. Very few. No,
they really
ABC,
just
CBS, NBC. Nope, never mentioned it.
They really just go for the lowest hanging fruit. I find the mainstream media channels. They're just the easiest stuff to reach. But there really is very little thought, critical thinking in journalism.
And this is one of their colleagues.
I know, yeah.
I mean, this is one of their colleagues, and they won't say anything about this. It's just disgusting.
Let's talk about the Truth Social post that he put out. He's taken that phrase, drain the swamp, and he's now repurposed it. And he's now launched Swamp the Vote, which, if you remember drain the swamp the vote doesn't really make much sense. But I'll put on the screen and just read what he wrote. This is Trump's Truth Social post. Today we launched Swamp the Vote USA. Whether you vote absentee, by mail, early, in person, or on election day, we will secure your vote. Just vote. They are all good options. The way to win is to swamp them with votes. Now, this is a bit of a turnaround for Trump, isn't it? Because he was very anti-mail-in voting and early voting and absentee voting. He wanted to make it all about showing up on the day and becoming dehydrated in the process of waiting to vote. Tell us why he's changed his story and why he's had this wake-up call where he realizes that he might not actually have the votes after all.
Because he tanked 2 Senate elections and the midterms with this ridiculous conspiracy about mail-in and early voting. And when you think about it, after he lost in November 20, we had the 2 Senate runoffs in Georgia, both elections, the Loeffler Perdue against Warnock and Ossoff races, right? And at that time, Trump was telling everybody not to vote by mail and not to vote early because that's all rigged and it's all a setup, and they throw the votes away and they put them in carts and they shred them and
they stuff them in bags under the table, Ron.
They hide, so don't do it, and so and then it continued into 2022 into the midterms, and you have people like all these conspiracy theorists, Christina Bobb, Mike Lindell out there saying the same thing. The theory is that if the Democrats know going into election day how much they're behind, by counting all these mail-in and early ballot. So they'll know, okay, we're 50,000 votes behind. They will rig the election day machine voting to know, because they know exactly how many they need. So don't do that. This is the conspiracy. Don't vote early and absentee, because then the Democrats won't know how many votes they need to rig it on election day, and they won't be able to pull it off. This is what they told their people. And what happened is their people did not vote early and absentee. And you know what happened? In a lot of these races, there was rain, there was bad weather, there were issues, like in the Kerry Lake race, they had issues with some of the machines, and she went nuts because all her people were lined up in 5-hour long lines trying to vote, and they couldn't. So they gave up and went home, some of them. So it really backfired. Trump's conspiracy theories really blew up in his face. Well, he's not about to let that happen to him. That might have screwed a couple of Senate candidates and Kerry Lake and a bunch of people in the midterms, but he's not about to let that screw him. So now the conspiracy theories are off. You know, it's like, no. Forget all that stuff we said before. We want you voting by mail, early. Do whatever you can to vote. Get your friends to vote. However you want to vote, just vote for me.
And the other thing is that, you know, in those midterms, a lot of the candidates that he endorsed were crackpots, but he endorsed them because they said nice things about him when you know, level-headed people just wouldn't. And so he ended up having a whole catalogue of lunatics that were his, you know, endorsed candidates. And he's done it again now, hasn't he, with this guy Serrano for the Senate in New Jersey. Just tell us about this. Actually, no, let me show the clip, because it's kind of funny if we build a little Jeopardy first and see him celebrating, and then we'll tell everybody the result.
Serrano Glasser, she's a fantastic woman. She's a fantastic woman, and I think, look, you know what? My record is very unblemished for support. I'm giving her my complete and total endorsement. She's been such a tremendous person, loves the state so much. I said, well, but then they said that her person is a Christie person. I said, I'm endorsing you immediately.
He has no idea who she is, first of all.
No. You know, the person that beat her is a gay Republican who's friends with Chris Christie, and that's the issue.
Yeah.
You know, but that's the person that gives them the best chance to win in New Jersey. The same way in 2022, Dave McCormick would have given them a better chance to win the Senate seat in Pennsylvania, but instead he wants Oz. And in Georgia, there were 20 people who would have probably won that Senate seat for them, or at least given him a much better chance, instead of Herschel Walker. You know, but Trump doesn't want people unless they're 100% loyal to him. So here you have a case of this woman who is completely 100% loyal to Trump, running against a guy who's gay and is friends with Chris Christie. So who does Trump side with? The 100% loyal person. And she gets smoked. I mean, some of the people posted some early results that showed her down like 20 points. She ended up losing by 7. I mean, that's a lot when you're running in a Republican primary and you have the endorsement of Trump and you lose by 7 points. That's pretty humiliating for Trump, you know. And once again, what does Trump say about that last night? Not a word, you know.
Well, I want to remind people that Donald Trump hasn't won anything since 2016.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
And even in 2016, he didn't win the popular vote.
Yep.
Hillary won the popular
46%.
vote. And, you know, I put Donald Trump's win in 2016 down to James Comey making that speech a few days before the vote, saying that Hillary Clinton was going to be criminalized or was being investigated. Just think about that. If that put people off Hillary, Donald Trump is now a convicted felon. And so that will put people off. Independent voters, undecided voters, it will put people off, as maybe it did in 2016 with Hillary. And she wasn't even guilty. That's the other thing. And the other issue,
you know, the health things where they were claiming that she had all these health problems.
Yeah, but that was the David Pecker, and that was propaganda from the National Enquirer that Trump thought of. So there was all that stuff, and Vladimir Putin and the Kremlin meddling in the election through social media and everything else. So if you put those things into the equation, Donald Trump has only won because he got very lucky. It was an anomaly, in my view. His support is because it's cult-like. It makes more noise. It's like a an evangelical church with music and noise and celebration, and it's just a very noisy affair. And Democrats don't operate like that. They don't worship Joe Biden like he's the son of God, or even God, as Donald Trump thinks he is. He's actually jealous of the Lord.
And they say that that's a sign of weakness, that the fact that we aren't wearing, Biden hats and T-shirts and flags and means that he doesn't have support. That's not the case at all.
So my point is that his support has not gone up since 2016, because in 2016, people didn't really know. They might have just known him from TV, and they might have just known him as being a realtor, a flipper or some kind of financier, and they voted for him because he was rich, and they blindly thought that a rich guy, it turns out he wasn't rich, but they thought that this wealthy guy would do a good job. And so I understand that some people just didn't get it. But we know who he is now, Ron.
Yeah.
And he has been exposed at every juncture through the January 6th investigation, which you mentioned earlier, but of course all of these investigations, and now of course this criminal charge. And so, he really doesn't stand a chance of winning in November based on that analysis, because his rallies are getting smaller. It's getting more difficult for him to do it. He's getting older and the dementia is kicking in. Nothing really is on Donald Trump's side, apart from Vladimir Putin and some very wealthy donors and lobbyists. I really think we need to remain realistic about all of this. But at the same time, the message that he's putting out, which is, swamp the vote, we have to do the same message for those who care for democracy and therefore need to vote for Joe Biden.
And I'm not a poll guy. I hate polls. I think the polling industry is garbage and all of that. But what I will tell people who do want to read polls is pay attention to likely voter polls, okay? Because that's really all that matters. All that really matters is likely voters in 6 states. You look at those polls, okay, if they're accurate, you're getting an accurate measure. But if you're just going off a national poll, who cares what people in Alabama think? That doesn't matter. We already know where Alabama's electoral votes are going. Trump could have a 90% popularity in Alabama. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's 90 or 50 plus 1. They get the same number of electoral votes either way. So that's why when you read these national polls, you see you have all voters, registered voters, and then you have likely voters. Likely voters, where does that come from? People who vote in every election, who have voted in the last 3 consecutive elections in a row. Those are likely voters. And polls who measure that are the most accurate. But these polls that measure just registered voters, that doesn't mean anything, because, 40% of the American public doesn't vote. So it's like, who cares what they think?
And also, the numbers of people involved in these so-called qualitative polls, if it's under 1,000 people, I think the one that I read a couple of days ago was 863 people surveyed.
Yeah, right.
It's not worth the paper that it's printed on.
I just saw that one was like 460 people.
Right. And they've all got landlines. Funny that. Okay, listen, we need to take a quick break. I want to come back, though, and talk about Marjorie Taylor Greene as she takes on Dr. Anthony Fauci, although she refuses to call him doctor because she thinks he should be in prison. That's all to come next on Uncovered. Nobody likes using a cheap razor. That's why you've got to meet Henson Shaving. They're a family-owned aerospace parts manufacturer that has made parts for the ISS and Mars rover, and now they're bringing precision engineering to your shaving experience. If you're like 88% of men who experience irritation from shaving, you might be expecting the worst from each shave, yet Henson users have seen dramatic improvements. Henson Shaving's innovation comes from an interesting analogy. Think of razor blades as diving boards. The longer the board, the more it wobbles. The micro wobbles are what lead to more nicks and cuts. Henson solves this by minimizing blade extension, addressing the root cause of bad shaves. And it gets better. The razor has built-in channels to evacuate hair and cream, which makes clogging virtually impossible. The Henson razor works with standard dual-edged blades to give you that old-school shave with the benefits of new-school tech. Once you own a Henson razor, it's only about $3 to $5 a year to replace the blades. It's time to say no to subscriptions and yes to a razor that'll last you a lifetime. Visit hensonshaving.com/uncovered to pick the razor for you and use code UNCOVERED and you'll get 2 years worth of blades free with your razor. Just make sure to add them to your cart. That's 100 free blades when you head to hensonshaving.com/uncovered and use code UNCOVERED. Have you heard about senolytics yet? It's a class of ingredients discovered less than 10 years ago, and they're being called the biggest discovery of our time for promoting healthy aging and enhancing your physical prime. Your life goals in your career and beyond require productivity. But let's be honest, the aging process is not our friend when it comes to endless energy and productivity, and that's why I use Qualia Senolytic. If someone would have told me that there was science-backed ingredients that could help me feel 15 years younger in a matter of months, I wouldn't have believed it. Then I tried Qualia Senolytic. As we age, everyone accumulates senescent cells in their body. Senescent cells cause symptoms of aging, such as aches and discomfort, slow workout recovery, sluggish mental and physical energy associated with that middle-age feeling. Also known as zombie cells, they are old and worn out and not serving a useful function for our health anymore, but they're taking up space and nutrients from our healthy cells. Much like pruning the yellowing and dead leaves off a plant, Qualia Senolytic removes those worn-out senescent cells to allow for the rest of them to thrive in the body. Resist aging at the cellular level. Try Qualia Senolytic. Go to neurohacker.com/uncovered for up to $100 off and use code UNCOVERED at checkout for an additional 15% off. That's neurohacker.com/uncovered for an extra 15% off your purchase. Thank you, Neurohacker, for sponsoring today's episode. And you can find links to our sponsors in the description below. Okay, we're back. Ron, let's talk about Marjorie Taylor Greene, who's been showing herself up yet again. She had a couple of meltdowns, one actually inside the hearing. This was a hearing with Dr. Anthony Fauci, questioning him about the origins of the COVID-19 pandemic and the virus. And it was so embarrassing, really, because I don't know if you've seen the documentary Fauci that's on National Geographic. You can watch it on Disney+. It is, to learn about him as a clinician, as a person who's devoted his life to public service, AIDS, Ebola, coronavirus. The guy is remarkable and so sweet, might be one of the nicest people you'll ever meet. And yet he is painted as the devil incarnate by MAGA Republicans, suggesting that he should be executed or that he should be imprisoned. And the poor guy, every time what he basically said in the hearing and afterwards was that every time they do this, death threats increase that he receives. Just kind of tell us how you feel about it before we look at these clips.
Yeah, he really became, for the right, for MAGA, the face of COVID restrictions, lockdowns, when in reality, he's a doctor, he's a scientist. He had no power or authority to do anything. All he could do is give his best recommendation based on the data and the science that was known at the time.
Yeah.
But, and the CDC was the one making recommendations on masks, social distancing, all of this kind of stuff, not Dr. Fauci. He was not in the CDC. That was Redford. Fauci was NIH. So, it's like he was not the one doing all this stuff, but because he was the face that was at the COVID briefings and on camera and doing a lot of interviews, he became, the focus of evil that they went after. And that's really sad. Like you said, for those of us who remember Fauci from the 80s, as I do, during the AIDS epidemic, we know that this is a guy who, he could have left government service at any time in his career and made a fortune and been famous. if he wanted to, but he chose not to. He stayed in government service. So what he did in this hearing is like the Super Bowl for these crazies, because this is the first time he's testified since he retired in 2022. First time they brought him before Congress, probably the last time too. This is probably the last shot they were going to get at him. And so they were all geeked up, that they were going to crucify Fauci and they were going to prove all their theories about Fauci. And basically there's 4 main conspiracies that they advanced. And one by one, he addressed each one and just shut them down. And we can go through them. I don't know if you want to play a clip now, or we can go through the.
Let's take a look at Marjorie attacking him first in the hearing. It's I hope you're not eating. It's not for the faint-hearted. Here we go.
What this committee should be doing, we should be recommending you to be prosecuted. We should be writing a criminal referral because you should be prosecuted for crimes against humanity. You belong in prison, Dr. Fauci.
Mr. Chairman.
I mean, he handled it very well because I guess, he's a highly intelligent person and he knew what was going to be coming. He doesn't, live in a cave. I mean, the guy is very used to dealing with these cretins and he handled it very well.
He did. So let's talk about the 4 conspiracies that have been swirling out there for years about Fauci that he, systematically addressed one by one. Number one, that he caused COVID. That's the main conspiracy, that he is responsible for COVID because he funded gain of function research in the lab and there was the lab leak. Therefore, it was his funding that resulted in COVID. I mean, just a ridiculous theory, whether it was a lab leak or not. The NIH research that they were funding, which was very, very limited over there, had absolutely nothing to do with this virus or COVID or anything else. It was very limited in nature. And they have absolutely no proof whatsoever that any funding from the U.S. was connected whatsoever to COVID. And he went through that sort of systematically and debunked that. But they don't want to hear it. But the point is he did. Next, that he covered up and suppressed the lab leak theory, that he was hell-bent, that he wanted this to not have come from the lab because of his involvement with the Wuhan lab, and that he wanted so badly for it to be, for people to believe that it came from nature to hide his own culpability, right? So he pointed out that when COVID first hit, they had a big conference call with the leading scientists from all over the world on this conference call, and they all advanced multiple theories over how this started. And he pointed out that on this conference call, there was a couple of people who advanced the lab leak theory. By the end of that call, those scientists had changed their mind, and there was almost a unanimous consensus that it did not come from the lab. And he said that he took no position in that meeting. So it was the idea that he was the one who pushed this to scientists around the world, and they all fell in lockstep and went along. The opposite was true. Number three, conspiracy number 3 is that Fauci supposedly made millions from pharmaceutical companies off the vaccines and treatments and masks and this and that. You know, he was under oath. Nicole Maliotakis, who, by the way, is George Santos has accused her of doing insider trading, calls her Nicole Malio Stock Tips. She accused him of profiting off millions. He's under oath. How much have you made, Dr. Fauci? How many royalties have you made in your career, 40-year career? 0. Nothing. He made nothing. So I said to these people on Twitter, I said, okay, he's under oath now saying he made nothing. It's easy to prove this. If you have the proof, put him in jail. This is your chance. But they have no proof. They have nothing, only accusations. And the final.
Shall I show the clip of Maliotakis first?
Go ahead.
Yeah, because it's interesting seeing him do this. Almost the white power symbol, isn't it? Here he is.
The conspiracy.
Appreciate that. Dr. Fauci, how much have you earned from royalties from pharmaceutical companies since the pandemic began in 2021?
0.
It says NIH scientists made $710 million in royalties from drug makers. you're saying that you did not receive any of the $710 million.
On COVID, I received, I think, $122 for a monoclonal antibody that I made 27 years ago.
Okay, so just in general, though, how much have you received, not related to COVID, just in general, how much have you received in royalties between 2021 and 2023?
I think none.
Okay, so somebody received the $710 million.
Somebody did, but not me.
You didn't receive any royalties. Okay.
I mean, I see no royalties associated with COVID. I mentioned.
I said.
No, I want.
No, I just said.
I'm on the record, and I want to make sure that this is clear. That I've developed a monoclonal antibody about 25 years ago that's used as a diagnostic that has nothing to do with COVID, and I receive an average of about $120 a year from that patent.
Okay, but the bottom line.
I love him. He's, they should manufacture little versions of him. Stuffies.
The New York Post article.
I know, that's what's so funny. But so much of the Republican conspiracy theories come from right-wing and far-right media. And like with Trump having all those sheets printed out from, Fox and everything else and waving it as if it's evidence. The system of propaganda just feeds itself on the right. It has no bearing on reality at all.
Yeah. It's just, you're citing conspiracy theories, right? In right-wing media.
Yeah.
It was the same thing with Hunter Biden and James Comer. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
You have all these conspiracy theories swirling around, but you bring them into Congress, you put witnesses under oath, and they all fall apart. They look sexy on the internet, but they don't work under oath. They can never prove all these conspiracies. They can never prove them. They couldn't prove them against Hunter. They couldn't prove them against Fauci, and they couldn't prove them against Joe. The other conspiracy all came from one guy. One guy, what was his name? I forgot his name. But one guy testified before them that he claimed that he had a back channel email to Fauci. He was a senior advisor to NIH. He was an advisor. He was not an advisor to Fauci. He was an advisor to the government. And so he claimed that he had a back channel email with Fauci where they could talk about the pandemic and not use and avoid Freedom of Information Act requests by using this private email. This is what he claimed. Okay. Fauci said, and by the way, that guy has been disciplined multiple times for misconduct and violating policy. Not Fauci, that guy. So Fauci was asked about it under oath. Did you have any back channel email? Fauci's like, I barely knew this guy. He's like, I was never attended any meeting with this guy. He didn't report to me. He wasn't an advisor to me. I had no back channel emails, and I never used a private email. This is the Hillary email stuff all over again with Fauci. I never used private email. So you know what, Republicans, if you got the proof that he did, show your work. Where's the proof? Stop the conspiracies and bring the proof.
But this is a really important point, isn't it? And I actually don't think people talk about it enough. And that is that all the evidence that has been brought to Congress for hearings, from Hunter Biden investigations, Joe Biden impeachment investigations, COVID investigations, anything that is brought from the right is relying on evidence that is written by conspiracists in right-wing media. That there is nothing is based in fact. And that is just proof that the right-wing media is responsible for so much time wasted, money wasted, also the brainwashing, the brainwashing of MAGA Republicans, this Trump contagion. It's all courtesy of an implosion of information on the right.
People died because they believe these people.
Yeah. And with Trump saying,
ivermectin,
taking ivermectin, which is kind of a horse dewormer, and Trump.
I posted many clips in 2021 of these people dying, getting COVID and dying because they refused to go to the hospital, they refused treatment, and they refused to go with any of the guidelines. And I got attacked by right wingers saying that I was dancing on their graves. I wasn't dancing on their graves. I was trying to get other people to wake up and stop listening to these idiots.
I mean, hydroxychloroquine. Do you remember that one? Sure. And what about a light, Ron? What about a light that maybe you could put inside of the body and you could like kill it that way? And apparently disinfectant, it kills it. You just sales of Lysol went through the roof.
I can remember. I don't know if I mentioned this, but I remember I used to get so furious during his COVID briefings.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, I want to hear from doctors. I want to hear from scientists. I don't want to hear from this orange fool who's up there throwing out conspiracies and nonsense. And so one day on Twitter, I filmed myself with a blood pressure monitor during a COVID briefing.
Right.
And I put it on and as he's talking, I was just showing it on camera as it was going up. It went to like 160.
Oh my goodness.
He almost killed me.
It was a dark time. And the other thing, of course, is that billions and billions of people around the world have now taken mRNA vaccines and have been, their lives have been saved. They've not been hospitalized and they've not succumbed to the virus seriously. And so we do have Fauci to thank for that, because he was the one that made it happen so quickly. And it's very impressive.
Here's a postscript that Fauci pointed out a lot. And that is, it's easy now to go back and say, well, maybe we didn't need to put masks on 5-year-olds. Maybe we didn't need to have social distancing outside. It's easy now in hindsight to go back and Monday morning quarterback. But 5,000 people were dying a day. We didn't know all the answers. We were figuring it out in real time as people were dying. And we were maybe being overly cautious. Yes, but with good reason. And this is one of the things that Fauci said. Yeah, we made some mistakes. Yeah, we were wrong about some things. Of course, it's science. It's evolving. But, like masks, they brought up the mask. He's like, of course we didn't do testing. We didn't do scientific analysis to figure out if masks on young kids were effective or not. We didn't have time. That takes months to do those studies. We were just trying to do everything we could to save lives.
My kids were very happy wearing masks. They got used to it and it wasn't a problem. But I also said, would you want to be operated on by a surgeon who wasn't wearing a face mask? Right? Just think about that for a second. Listen, we have to take another quick break.
Not if it's Ronnie Jackson, for sure.
Well, yeah. The jury's out on his qualifications. Let's take a quick break. We're going to come back because I've got another clip of Marjorie where she's kind of turning on her own people. We'll see that next here on Uncovered. Have you ever wished you had a whiter and brighter smile? Well, before you visit a dentist, you should know that whitening treatments there can be expensive, and it's not just the price. You also have to book the appointment and schedule time away from work or family to sit in a dentist's office and undergo the procedure. It's a hassle. Fortunately, now you can try Smile Actives at home or anywhere, anytime. Smile Actives offers a safe and affordable alternative to those expensive whitening procedures. 97% of Smile Actives users in a clinical trial reported up to 6 shades whiter on average, all within 30 days. Simply add Smile Active's Pro Whitening Gel to your regular toothpaste. It's been formulated with polyclean technology to boost stain removal and deliver active whitening ingredients into teeth's grooves and crannies to get better whitening. Smile Actives makes a teeth whitening gel that can simply be added to your toothbrush every time you brush your teeth. No change in your routine, no extra time, no more messy strips, trays, or lights. People will start commenting on your whiter, brighter smile in just days. Visit smileactives.com/uncovered today to receive a special buy one, get one free offer with auto delivery plus free shipping and handling. That's smileactives.com/uncovered. Terms and conditions apply. See site for details. And we're back. Details on Smart Actives and all our sponsors down in the description. Okay, let me play this clip of Marjorie Taylor Greene. This was kind of after the hearing. She started in the corridor shouting that Republicans are useless and everything else. And then there's this interview where she went on, was one of the far-right networks or podcast. Oh, no, it was the War Room, wasn't it? It was Steve Bannon's War Room.
Yep.
Let's just take a look at this, then you can tell us what she's up to.
We should be doing right now. Today, we should be voting to impeach Joe Biden because of the invasion in the United States. Oh, but no, none of that is happening up here in Washington, D.C., because Republicans continually have their head up their ass and can't figure out how to actually use the power that the people gave us. This is a new time in America, and I am so fed up, Steve. I am so fed up. I am so sick of it because I know people at home are sick of it. People are sick and tired of a feckless, useless Republican Party that never does a damn thing to stop any of this. They just sit in the boat and row along with the Democrats and row.
I find myself agreeing with Marjorie Taylor Greene. I might have to
did.
borrow your blood pressure monitor.
Everybody did. You know, when she was first elected in 2020, I'll never forget it because I was one of the people that see it was sort of a race against time back then because she had done this Facebook Live show for 3 or 4 years where she had posted all these wild conspiracy videos, and I and a few others were in the process of unearthing those. And she, at the same time, is in the process of deleting those. She ended up deleting all of them. They're all gone now. The only ones that survive from back in the day of Marge before she got elected is a handful that some of us have dug up. Where one was that Hillary assassinated JFK Jr. That she was behind his plane crashing. I mean, there was all kinds of wild, clips. And when she was elected, I was posting these, and I got a lot of pushback from Democrats at the time who said, why are you doing this? She's nobody. She's a freshman representative. Who cares about Marjorie Greene? I said, no. I said, in 2 years, she's going to be more popular with the MAGA base than Kevin McCarthy or any of the other ones. She's going to be immensely popular, and she's going to be the best thing that ever happened to the Democratic Party. Like, her being the poster child, the face of the Republican Party was a goal of mine. I wanted that to happen because I know that, look, the American public, if you probably polled the United States, she probably has like a 20% approval rating. Now, she's popular in her district, and people always say, we need to vote her out. She'll never get voted out. As long as she stays and runs in that district, she'll be in Congress as long as she wants because that district is perfect for her, the demographics of it, which we can get into, but, we don't need to. The point is that if she is the face of, look at the division and the strife and the anger that she has caused between members and caused people to go at it, and she's just like pouring gasoline on the fire of MAGA division in the House. And look, that benefits that benefits Democrats. Is she toxic? Is it bad for democracy? All that stuff. But just looking at it from a hardball, real politic perspective, every time she goes and does one of these rants like that, it helps the Democrats.
Yeah, she's an acquired taste, put it that way. I'm sure somebody loves her. It makes me sad, though, to know that she's going to potentially be around for a long time. I have a feeling, just from watching her in that clip, that maybe she's done,
Yeah, I absolutely do not think she intends to do what I just said. I said if she chose to stay in that district and represent that in Congress, she would be there forever.
Right.
That is not her intent. Her intent is bigger things.
Yeah.
And what's going to happen is the first time she steps out of that district and tries to run for something or do something else, it's going to be an epic fail.
Interesting. Just going back to the hearing just for a moment before we leave the Marjorie fold, there was somebody sitting behind Dr. Fauci that you were particularly interested in. I'll just show the clip and you can tell us who this was.
Hey, Tony, are you sad that you're in the number 3 spot as it applies to murdering people throughout the entire world after Stalin and Hitler? Sir? How many people do you think you murdered based on your policies, along with Mike Pence at the White House Coronavirus Task Force? How much did Mike Pence know about your involvement in taking not only millions of dollars, according to the documentation, but also you subsequently funding the Wuhan Institute of Virology that ended up destroying America's economy, as well as destroying millions of people, whether it was through the myocarditis.
So there was quite a bit of trolling of him by Jan 6ers and MAGA Republicans, conspiracy theorists. Tell us about this guy sitting at the back.
Well, that there is Ivan Reichen, who is an associate of Michael Flynn. He's an attorney. He's an Army veteran, former Army officer, all around nut job and crazy guy who skulks around D.C. and shows up at events and heckles politicians and attends a lot of committee hearings. I'm not really sure what he does for a job, but he goes to a lot of these hearings and harasses people. And there you see he was waiting for Fauci. And I knew he was going to be waiting. He was going to be there and he was going to be waiting for Fauci. And you see he has his buddy, a guy named Matt Struck, was the one who was filming that. That's where I got the video from. Matt Struck's phone, and harassing. And then he sat directly behind Fauci. So because he's not stupid, he's mugging he knows the cameras are on Fauci. Therefore, he's in the camera shot. So he's back there making faces. Sitting next to him is a J6er who just got out of prison for what did he do? He broke in the Capitol on January 6th and went in a senator's office and put his feet up on the senator's desk, senator from Oregon, and was smoking marijuana in his office. He represented himself at trial, screamed and yelled at the foreman of the jury. When he reached the verdict, he was screaming at the foreman, was held in contempt, got an extra 6 months in jail, fresh out of prison, on probation. He's sitting behind Fauci, heckling Fauci. So they got kicked out of the hearing eventually. Ivan didn't, but and the other point is that a lot of people, by the way, have speculated that Ivan Reichen is the January 6th bomber, the DNC bomber, the pipe bomber. I don't know whether that's true or not. I'm not saying he is or he isn't, but a lot of people have speculated that he fits all the criteria. Who knows? The point is, this guy, I know we have First Amendment rights but this is a dangerous dude who's getting more and more unhinged. And the fact that he was in such proximity to Fauci here is kind of scary stuff, along with a J6er who just got out of prison.
It's so interesting. I'm not a First Amendment guy, as you know, because I didn't grow up with that in my place of birth. And so I'm really kind of learning about that line, that fine line between what is and what isn't acceptable. And I really don't know that, outright free speech without any form of regulation for hate speech or libel or any of these things is healthy. I know it's always held up as a great bastion of freedom, but it doesn't seem to be working from my kind of European perspective. But that's another conversation for another day where we talk about that for hours.
We can have that one
some
other day.
Yeah, some other time. I want to talk about, it's funny because you were just talking about, him being held in contempt and all that. And I was thinking like all of that stuff is what Trump did during his trial. And yet none of those things applied to him. Getting an extra 6 months in jail or this or that, or even being held overnight for causing trouble. I mean, different rules for different
folks. I got
folks.
an extra 6 months in jail for his outburst in court.
Yeah.
And look, you're right. Trump, nothing happens to him. Yeah.
Let's look at this clip that we have of Eric Trump giving some interesting theory about his dad's support.
They're literally feeding him, certain segments of the population that he might not have had in 2016 and 2020. Because for the first time, they realize that the system's coming down, that he's the victim. He's the victim that oftentimes some of their communities were. And you see them swing. You look at the African-American vote, right? That's swinging over to Donald Trump in spades. Look at...
He's just making stuff up. What's going on here, Ron?
Yeah, I mean, it's part of the Jesse Waters thing. You know, it's the racism element here. It's like they see he's a victim just like they are. Like, this is Eric Trump, who doesn't know anything at all about the black community in America. Nothing, zero. He has no contact with them. He has no relationship with black people whatsoever. I mean, I follow him and his wife on social media, Instagram, different platforms. The only very, very rarely do you ever see them around a black person. And that's typically like somebody who's at Mar-a-Lago who's a right-wing Republican. He has no concept of the way the average black person in America thinks or what they believe. But what he's saying here is, they've been victimized by the justice system. So has my dad. And they identify with him now. Well, how the hell does Eric Trump know? You know, it's just, I hope that black people see what they're saying in this condescension and this racism and this stereotyping, and get even more repulsed by these people.
Yeah. Well, I have no doubt they will. I feel, I don't know. This is now that you've opened my eyes to this notion that all of the propaganda in the right wing comes from the right wing. Like no one crosses over into reality. It's really kind of opened up something for me, like a new area of thinking about this idea that they exist in their bubble. And it was almost like just a window on their world, that they can literally say anything and claim anything. And none of it is true. And the only true test of this is the ballot box in November.
Well, you saw it in Trump's trial, right? Who did he cite as legal experts? He said, all the legal experts agree with me, but he kept citing the same four people.
Right.
Over and over again.
All Fox contributors.
It's like, well, that's not everybody.
What about that video that we put out of Trump leaving the building and waving to the crowds, except there was nobody there. Nobody.
Yeah, it's the Wizard of Oz. It's all over again. Don't look at the man behind the curtain, you know.
Let's talk about the RNC just for a moment, because this is an interesting piece that you posted about with Lara Trump and the RNC support for Hogan. Let's do you want to just set that up before I show it?
It's just bizarre that at a time when Mitch McConnell, Rick Scott, and others are desperate to retake control of the Senate, and everything is lining up in their favor. We've talked about this before, that there are more Democrats up in swing states than Republicans by far. Many vulnerable Democrats here in these Senate races, and they only have a 1-seat majority that I've already predicted. I think that they're going to take the Senate by 1 or 2 seats. But who knows? But it's going to be tight. But the point is here that every Senate race is critical. So you have Larry Hogan, former governor of Maryland, who, Maryland is a Democratic state. Look, virtually no Republican can win Maryland except Larry Hogan. Larry Hogan, he's the only one, a Republican, because he's moderate and he's reasonable and he's intelligent and this and that. And so he's really the only guy that could possibly have a shot. Is he going to win? Probably not, but at least he has a chance. But then you have Lara Trump just incinerating that chance, just destroying it by saying that, he's not loyal to Trump. He doesn't love Trump enough. So no Republican should vote for Larry Hogan. I mean, Hogan had to be sitting at home watching that, just going, well, thanks for playing.
Yeah.
It was not because, this perfectly illustrates why all these Republican politicians are so afraid of Donald Trump, because he did this to their Senate candidate from Colorado in the midterms in 2022. 2 weeks before the election, told his MAGA people, don't vote for this guy. And they didn't. And he lost big and he had a shot, so this is what they're all afraid of, that if Trump ever goes into their races, see, it's one thing for him to try and primary them, and then whether that works or not, does, whatever. But if he actually tells general election voters not to vote for this person, that could torpedo a lot of them. That could wreck a lot of them.
But this is the destruction of the Republican Party as we know it, isn't it?
It's all about Trump.
All
it's
about
not
Trump.
Taking back the Senate. It's about Trump worship. Because he doesn't care about policy or
Right.
getting anything through.
But Trump has an expiry date, right? It's printed on his backside, and he will probably not live, let's say, a decade for argument's sake. So beyond a decade, right, at most, just beyond his use by date or sell by date or best before date,
expiration
date. What a great day that might be. A national holiday.
We should make it a national holiday.
We need to recognize the fact that what he's done by corrupting not just the Republican Party, but also the RNC by installing Lara Trump there. It is turning the whole thing into the cult. There is nothing now outside of the cult within the whole Republican movement.
It is inconceivable that Ronna McDaniel would ever say something like that. She would never. Ronna McDaniel, if she was still RNC chair, would be doing everything she could to help Hogan win because she wants to win the Senate. But Lara Trump doesn't care about that. She doesn't care about winning the Senate. She said that when she first became chair, right? What did she say? Everything we're going to do is about electing Donald Trump. That's all we care about.
Keep it in the family. Here she is.
Republican Senate candidate Larry Hogan in Maryland, and again, I'm asking you this in your capacity as one of the co-chairs of the entire Republican Party, and he's a popular former governor in Maryland. He wrote this right ahead of the verdict. He said, quote, "Regardless of the result, I urge all Americans to respect the verdict and the legal process." That is not the Republican Party line at the moment, and in fact, he was attacked by the top Trump advisor, Chris LaCivita, who wrote that he, quote, "just ended your campaign," end quote. Does the Republican National Committee support Larry Hogan for Senate?
Well, I'll tell you one thing. I don't support what he just said there. I think it's ridiculous. And I think anybody who's not speaking up in the face of really something that should never again have seen the light of day, a trial that would never have been brought against any other person aside from Donald Trump.
But does the RNC support his bid?
The respect of anyone. Well,
he doesn't deserve the respect of anyone?
He doesn't deserve the respect of anyone in the Republican Party at this point. And quite frankly, anybody in America, if that's the way you feel, that's very upsetting to hear that.
So are you willing to cede the Senate seat in Maryland to the Democratic Party and not support Larry Hogan?
What I'll tell you is that we, of course, want to win as a party, but that is a shame. And I think he should have thought long and hard before he said that publicly.
Are you willing to use Republican Party resources to support his bid or not? It sounds like you're saying you're not.
Well, I'll get back to you on all the specifics monetarily, but what I can tell you is that as the Republican Party co-chair, I think he should never have said something like that. I think that's ridiculous.
Quite an awkward interview. I don't even know why they bother having her on. You know, CNN have got their own agenda, I guess.
She's so in over her head.
Yeah.
Like she doesn't know. She never expected that question to get asked. She's totally unprepared for it. And she could have handled it in a way to kind of put her. What she's saying there is because he said we have to respect the verdict. That's it. He's out. Forget that Senate seat.
But that is the level of cult-like behavior that really we need to be talking more about. The fact that it is, it's so fascistic in a way because there is only one supreme leader as far as they're concerned. And, they've even lost sight of why Trump needs to win, right? The whole kind of make America great again has been put to one side. Not that we even know what that even means. But there are no policies now. It is simply a case of Donald Trump as a celebrity and as a he's almost a mythical figure. Yeah. Has to be reinstalled.
Yeah. And by the way, I trash CNN all the time, but we have to say that was really a good interview. She did a really good job there. CNN host.
Yeah. It's unfortunately the people that need to see it probably won't. Okay, we don't have long left, so I want to talk quickly about Joe Tacopina because I've always been a bit of a bit of a fan of his. He is the kind of He looks like he's out of Goodfellas, right? He was the lawyer that was representing Donald Trump, but then kind of threw in the towel was it the E. Jean Carroll one?
He tells the truth too much.
He tells the truth too much. And he accidentally gave the whole case away on television. He's now basically turned against Donald Trump to a point that he's basically saying the guy is a moron. And it's rather brilliant. Let's take a quick look.
They might have a spring today, but it's not going to last very long, because what happened in New York is a travesty of justice. Everybody knows it.
I can't believe the hoax, this sham, this absolute injustice justice system, weaponizing the justice system of the United States of America against a political opponent. Un-American. Joe Biden, you're fired.
I do believe the Supreme Court should step in. Obviously, this is totally unprecedented, and it's dangerous to our system. This will be overturned, guys. There's no question about it. It's just going to take some time.
What are your thoughts on what you just heard, Joe? And as I mentioned, they're just a few of the many of the Republican leaders.
Yeah, when I hear, like, Tim Scott is someone I used to respect, but I sort of lost a lot of respect from what I just heard, because he sounded so uneducated, unintelligent, and made no sense at all. To say that, look, I understand there's a political motivation to a lot of what's going on in our country today. And everyone wants to sort of paint the broad brush and, this is a political vendetta and then weaponization of the justice system. This is a state case. This is different than the Jack Smith cases, okay? This is not a federal prosecution. Joe Biden or anyone from his Justice Department have absolutely zero to do with the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. They have no jurisdiction over him. They have no contacts with him. They have no control, certainly, over him. So to say that Joe Biden brought this case is one of the most ridiculous things I've heard. We know that's not the case. And even Trump's lawyers know that's not the case.
Now, wait right there, because as you say, even Trump's lawyers know that's the case. You were attorney with Trump. You were on Trump's case early and got off the case. So you're speaking as one that knew, as you signed into work for Trump, which you explained on this show why, and you explained why you got out, that this had nothing to do with Joe Biden or any of the federal government trying to lean in on Donald Trump.
The federal government has no input on the Manhattan District Attorney. It's a state prosecution.
It's funny that it's taking a Trump lawyer to point this out finally. Do you think that Republicans are going to hear that message?
No. He was Trump's lawyer on this case.
Yep.
He's saying Joe Biden had absolutely nothing to do with this whatsoever. Yeah, he got off the case in January. Why did he get off? Because he watched the trial in New York with Engoron, saw the circus, and saw how Trump behaved, and saw how he, forced his lawyer to do unethical things, Alina Abba, and wanted no part of it and bailed before this trial. That's why I said he's the smartest lawyer to ever represent Trump, because he got out before everything went south. And he's a truth teller. He tells the truth. He went on Ari Melber's show and dropped some truths and got in trouble, then got some hot water. So the whole conspiracy behind that, the right-wing conspiracy that they've invented, that why Biden is behind this, is all based on Michael Colangelo, who is one of the prosecutors. There was 3 of the lead prosecutors. Michael was one of them. He did not do most of the trial. Joshua Steinglass did most of the trial. Colangelo did some of it, not a whole lot. But the reason why the conspiracy is because Colangelo used to work in the New York Attorney General's office, very high up. Then he was hired by the Justice Department, and then he left the Justice Department to go take this position in the Manhattan DA's office, where he was hired to do many things. He was hired one of the main thing he was hired for was housing, landlord-tenant stuff, to go after predatory landlords, interestingly enough, considering Trump's history. That's what he was hired to do, was to head up that division and a number of other things. Only one thing he's doing includes being on the Trump case as well. One of many. But this whole conspiracy was Joe Biden sent him into the Manhattan DA's office to get Trump. They have no evidence whatsoever of any of that. But, hey, where there's smoke, there's fire. So let's just throw the conspiracies out there.
I think that also the point that we made on the show last week, talking about how all of Trump's associates, his henchmen, people involved in his campaign in 2016 and 2020, and now, like with Peter Navarro and all of these people, they've all been convicted. There's like a whole bunch of criminals. He just surrounds himself with criminals. And CNN finally started piecing that together, and I think they did a graphic of it, didn't they? I'm sure they watch our show and just copy stuff from it, Ron.
And Tacopina wanted to make sure he's not on that list.
That's right. I know. Saving himself. Not a bad move. Listen, let's finish with the MAGA prophet Julie Greene. She's explained to her fans that when she said that God told her that there would not be a guilty verdict in Donald Trump's trial, that she wasn't actually wrong, even though it turned out to be a guilty reaction. Let's take a look at her.
He says there will be no guilty verdict because there's no crime. He will not do any time behind their bars and their prisons. No, they will not get what they wanted. No, not at all. Well, you can say, well, that was not true because there was a guilty verdict. Look, he says there will be no guilty verdict because when somebody is exonerated, it's like it never existed in the first place. You can have a fake inauguration. Doesn't mean the person in that place is a real president. You can have a fake king to be coronated. Doesn't mean he's actually king. You can have a fake verdict. It doesn't mean that person is actually guilty at all.
I mean, you and I are not even real, Ron. You know, you're just a vision that I'm having, and then other people are seeing my visions through the television.
That's pretty much what she's saying. Now, I wanted to talk about Julie Greene because I do post her from time to time, not a lot, but I do from time to time. And people sometimes say, why do you post this crazy lady? I post her because she has a huge following. She gets hundreds of thousands of views on these shows that she does, these prophecies where she says she gets messages from God every couple of days, and she'll go on the air and say, God says this and God says this. She'll read what God told her, supposedly. And she makes all these predictions. It's all political. Why do I post her? Number one, she has a huge following. Number two, she does all these MAGA events and these Republican events, these conferences. She's been up there on stage with Eric Trump, with, Mike Lindell, with Michael Flynn. Like, these people go on her show. She is somebody that is pretty well known in the right-wing ecosystem and universe, and she makes a decent amount of money off this stuff too. So what I'm trying to do is expose her and discredit her and show her as the charlatan and the fraud that she is by showing she makes all these predictions and they don't come true. And this time she said a week before that Trump was going to be found innocent by the jury. He wasn't. So then you see the clip, she goes on and says, well, it's going to be overturned on appeal, so God's prophecy wasn't wrong. And you know what? It's working because she now talks about me a lot on her show and how she's getting a lot of flack on Twitter because she's on Twitter. People are going after her when they see my clips. And she says it's taking a toll on her and it's causing her stress and mental health. Well, good, because I'm trying to drive her out of this business and get her to stop taking advantage of people and getting people to send her money because they think she's some prophet.
But there's been dozens and dozens of people like her in this country making millions of dollars, claiming to be prophets, claiming to, with these evangelical audiences in these mega churches. And it's a business here. It certainly doesn't happen or didn't happen where I'm from. And I've always found it fascinating, and my favorite show, I think I might have mentioned before, is The Righteous Gemstones, which is, John Goodman being this pastor with his whole family, and they're all enriching themselves from, and it's business. And
the ones that stay out of politics and just want to make money, there's plenty of them, and want to have their private jets and all that. I leave them alone.
Yeah.
The ones who cross over into politics.
I understand.
That's the ones. Yeah.
Hey, I just realized something. We have to finish, but I just realized something. You and I haven't seen each other since Donald Trump got found guilty on 34 counts.
That's right.
And is now a convicted felon to be sentenced next month.
That's right, yeah.
Well done, Ron.
Oh, it wasn't me.
To say that. No, I just wanted to say. I mean, Well
It's
done.
Michael Cohen.
It's
Michael Cohen. I was like screaming and yelling about all the interviews he was doing before the trial, and how I was very critical of Michael Cohen, and Michael Cohen made me furious many times. Okay, because of that. But after the verdict, I'm like, let him do as many interviews as he wants now. Take a victory lap, write another book.
So funny.
He can do whatever he wants.
Yeah. Well, this is the thing about that case, and we need to remind people, it was a jury of 12 New Yorkers who made the final decision, the same way that it was a grand jury that brought the case in the first place. And we need to recognize that these are civilians, these are Americans, and these are people who look at the evidence, as you said at the very beginning of this program, and, it's not political. It is about breaking the law, and that's what Donald Trump has done. And I look forward to his sentencing, and we will be discussing that when it comes around. Okay, listen, we have to finish, but Ron Filipkowski, thank you as ever. Don't forget to check out, haven't we got a new web address for MidasTouch.com? Haven't we got MidasNews.com now, I think?
It's either one.
Yeah, so check out MidasNews.com, because that's where Ron writes all his articles as well as postings. Don't forget to check me out on The Weekend Show coming on Sunday. I do that, like long-form interview shows. That's coming this Sunday. Got a really good one for you. A reminder to catch the audio podcast to this show. It'll drop tonight, so you can get that from wherever you get yours. And keep your eye on Midas Touch YouTube channel right here. You can stay right here for analysis from Ben and from Michael and from Karen and from all of the team. And we'll do our best to keep you up to date with everything that's happening across this crazy political landscape. I'm Anthony Davis. Ron, thanks a lot. See you on the other side.
You got it.